What if I told you that setting foot in the swamps of prehistoric Africa meant signing your own death sentence? One wrong step and you'd sink into quick mud crawling with giant snakes, face crocodiles so massive they could swallow you whole, or get torn apart by creatures no human alive today has ever faced. These weren't just swamps, they were nature's perfect killing grounds. And yet, against all odds, our ancestors entered this world of shadows and survived. But how? Imagine the unbearable humidity choking your lungs, clouds of insects carrying diseases we can barely pronounce, and predators like the terrifying Caprisuchus, the boar crocodile with tusk-like jaws that hunted both in water and on land. You wouldn't last a day here, maybe not even an hour. Still, hidden beneath this nightmare were the keys to life itself: fresh water, fish, and shelter. Archaeological finds reveal that early humans not only braved these death zones but thrived just enough to leave tools, bones, and stories buried in the mud. So the real question is, what secret advantage allowed them to endure a world that would destroy us in minutes? Stay tuned, because what scientists uncovered about prehistoric survival in these deadly swamps might rewrite everything you thought you knew about human evolution. Step into the swamps of prehistoric Africa, and you are stepping into the most merciless killing grounds nature has ever created, a place where every breath, every step, every sound could be your last. The ground beneath your feet isn't solid but treacherous, sucking mud that threatens to drag you under with each move, while the air itself feels heavy, damp, and suffocating, thick with humidity so overwhelming it weighs on your chest like chains. Clouds of insects rise in black waves, biting relentlessly, some carrying parasites that invade your blood, others diseases that can cripple you in days. The water, dark and foul-smelling, hides terrors far worse. Lurking just below the surface is Caprisuchus, the so-called boar crocodile, a monstrous 20-foot ambush predator with forward-jutting tusks and a skull built for sheer destruction. Unlike modern crocodiles, this beast could charge on land, snapping bone and tearing flesh in seconds, leaving no safe refuge for anything that dared enter its world. Fossil evidence tells us it wasn't alone. Giant snakes, thicker than tree trunks, slid silently through the reeds, while massive catfish and prehistoric lungfish capable of swallowing limbs prowled the waters. Above, monstrous stork-like birds circled with dagger beaks, while hippo-like beasts with unpredictable tempers churned the waters into chaos. This was no ordinary swamp, it was a hellscape built to break the unprepared, and you, standing here, wouldn't last an hour. But here is the paradox. Our ancestors not only faced these swamps, they used them. Archaeological digs have uncovered stone tools, charred remains of fires, butchered bones, and even traces of temporary camps at the edges of ancient wetlands. Evidence that prehistoric humans returned to these death zones again and again. Why risk it? Because for all their dangers, the swamps were overflowing with life-fresh water to drink in times of drought, fish and amphibians to catch, birds to trap, plants to gather, and reeds to weave into tools or shelters. The swamps were both nightmare and salvation, both a graveyard and a pantry, and early humans understood this duality better than anyone. Survival here wasn't about brute force. No man, woman, or child could wrestle a crocodile or outrun a snake. It was about intelligence, cooperation, and strategy. Our ancestors moved in groups, scanned the waters with wary eyes, carried fire to repel beasts, and used sharpened wooden spears to strike fish or defend themselves if something lunged from the reeds. They likely sang, shouted, or made noise to keep predators at bay, transforming fear itself into a weapon. Modern humans, soft-skinned, solitary, unarmed, would perish within hours, undone by infection, ambush, or exhaustion. But prehistoric people endured because they knew how to read danger in the rustle of plants, how to share food when one failed to catch it, how to trust each other when the swamp threatened to pull them under. And this is where the true story begins. The swamps of Africa were more than just killing fields. They were crucibles of survival that forced humanity to sharpen its mind, strengthen its bonds, and adapt against impossible odds. Stay tuned, because the deeper we look into these lost wetlands, The clearer it becomes that without the courage of our ancestors to face these watery giants, we might not be here today. If stepping into the swamps of prehistoric Africa felt like entering a living nightmare, surviving there meant unlocking strategies so advanced and so dangerous that they rewrote what it meant to be human. These were not just places of monsters, they were training grounds for intelligence, cooperation, and adaptation. Fossil evidence suggests that while predators like Capricus ruled the water, early humans turned their weaknesses into opportunities. Crocodiles, for example, were deadly, but they were also predictable. They hunted near certain shorelines, attacked at dawn and dusk, and left behind carcasses of animals too large to eat at once. Archaeologists believe our ancestors scavenged from these leftovers, stealing nutrition from the jaws of death itself. Fish bones, amphibian remains, and burned turtle shells uncovered at ancient sites tell us that humans learned to harvest the swamp's smaller, less obvious resources. But how? Imagine wading into waist-deep water with nothing but a sharpened stick, surrounded by unseen giants. This was not luck, it was teamwork. Groups likely fanned out, using noise and splashes to drive fish into traps, weaving reeds into nets, or digging small channels to redirect water and funnel prey. These same reeds may have been used to make makeshift rafts, allowing humans to float just beyond the reach of crocodiles while spearfishing in relative safety. Fire also became a weapon here, torches used to ward off predators or smoke used to flush out insects and drive animals toward ambush points. It was here in these wetlands that humanity learned to transform its greatest weakness, the soft, fragile human body, into its greatest strength, collective intelligence. Yet danger was always one misstep away. Imagine the terror of hearing reeds rustle only to realize too late that it wasn't wind but the slide of a snake thicker than your waist. Picture a child wandering too close to the water's edge and vanishing in a flash of jaws and spray, leaving only ripples in the dark. These losses would have been constant reminders that survival demanded more than bravery, it demanded memory, teaching and tradition. Skills had to be passed on, warnings had to be heeded, and stories had to be told around fires at night about the monsters that lurked in the swamp. In this way, the swamp shaped not just the body, but the mind, forcing humans to create the earliest forms of cultural oral knowledge, shared strategies, communal survival. And what's even more astonishing is that these harsh lessons didn't just help them endure, they gave them an edge over other species. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and even rival hominin groups may have avoided wetlands, while Homo sapiens adapted and thrived in them, learning flexibility that would eventually carry them across continents. So the question is, if these deadly swamps were so central to survival, what did they take from us in return? What price did humanity pay to become the swamp's unlikely master? The answers lie not just in bones and fossils, but in the very psychology of fear, cooperation, and resilience that still shapes us today. And as we go deeper into this story, you'll see that the swamps weren't just another habitat. They were the crucible where humanity was tested, broken, and ultimately forged into something new. Stay tuned, because the next part will reveal the shocking cost of surviving a world where even the air, the water, and the shadows conspired against you. The swamps of prehistoric Africa were not just dangerous, they were relentless engines of evolution that reshaped humanity in ways we are only beginning to understand. And every discovery pulled from mud and bone reveals both the brutality of life and the brilliance of survival. Archaeologists studying skeletal remains from swamp-adjacent sites find grim evidence of what it meant to endure here. Bones healed at odd angles after violent breaks, jaws worn down from chewing fibrous swamp plants in desperate hunger, infections etched into bone that testified of lives cut short by wounds turning septic in the disease-choked air. Imagine walking barefoot through stagnant water, a small scratch on your ankle from a reed festering until fever and death set in. Imagine entire families stalked by crocodiles longer than a car, snakes so massive they could constrict an adult in minutes, birds with spear-like beaks striking down with terrifying precision. To live here meant accepting that predators were not rare threats, they were constant presences. The water rippled with unseen hunters, the reeds whispered with serpents. The air itself swarmed with blood-sucking insects carrying parasites and deadly fevers. Yet the most dangerous element of all was not what could be seen, but what was felt. The psychological strain of living every moment on the edge of annihilation. To be human here was to live with fear so constant it became instinct, shaping behavior, sharpening senses and hardwiring survival into every decision. And yet, from this fear was born something extraordinary. Humans did not merely endure, they adapted in ways that turned the swamp's horrors into unlikely advantages. They learned to track crocodiles and predict their ambush points, scavenging carcasses left behind by these monsters. They mastered cooperative hunting, driving fish into hand-woven reed traps, spearing amphibians, and exploiting seasonal floods to harvest food that no predator guarded. They turned fire into both weapon and tool, smoking insects from hiding, driving animals toward ambush or carrying torches to keep darkness at bay. But beyond these tactics lay the most profound transformation. The swamp forced humans to become cultural beings. Survival depended not just on instinct, but on memory, teaching, and collective knowledge. Elders told children where not to step, which plants healed and which poisoned, how to move silently through reeds without startling predators. These lessons were not written but spoken, passed around flickering fires, sometimes in the form of stories about monsters lurking in the water. Those stories were more than fear, they were early myths, warnings wrapped in memory, and in them we see the first sparks of what would become religion, culture, and shared identity. The swamp demanded cooperation so complete that it reshaped human emotion itself. Love, loyalty, and grief were not luxuries but strategies. Protecting children meant the bloodline survived. Caring for the sick kept knowledge alive. Mourning the dead strengthened bonds and reminded the living of the risks. That could not be ignored. These emotional investments, so deeply human, may have been sharpened here, where the line between life and death was always visible. Other hominin species may have avoided these wetlands, too inflexible to adapt, but Homo sapiens embraced them, developing resilience and versatility that became our evolutionary edge. And here lies the irony. What should have destroyed us became the very forge that created our strength. The swamps etched lessons into our DNA: cooperate or perish, think ahead or die, remember or vanish. Even today, we carry echoes of those lessons in our instincts. Our fear of snakes, our unease in murky waters, our anxiety in buzzing swarms of insects all are shadows of ancestral memory. But so too are our strengths. Our ability to tell stories, to bond in families and communities, to create culture from chaos. Without the swamps, without their monsters and sickness, without the constant test of danger, we might never have become fully human. And that is the ultimate paradox. The wetlands of prehistoric Africa were hellscapes of mud, teeth, and disease. Yet they were also the crucible that forged intelligence, cooperation, empathy, and culture. We are here today not despite them, but because of them. The very ground that should have consumed our ancestors is the reason you can hear these words. Now, the swamps were our nightmare, our teacher, and our salvation, and in their shadows humanity was born.